as I mentioned before, our sitting congresswoman is knee deep with the real estate developers. We have overdevelopment as a crisis, but that's not all. Insurance is a crisis. Inflation, crisis. Interest rates, crisis. And all the while, not doing a damn thing about one of the most critical issues of them all, we have a corporate housing crisis. Pretty soon, these investment firms are going to buy up as many single-family homes as they could get their hands on. Forget apartments. I mean, we already know they're doing that. But the single-family homes, they're going to buy as many as they could get their hands on. And then eventually, they're going to be empty units because for them, they don't care if they get filled. These are multi-billion-dollar corporations that do not give a damn about your community and whether or not you have a roof over your head. It's all about profit. This is another example of end-stage capitalism. When you can't insure anybody because they can't afford it, then they're going to leave, and all you're going to have is a monopoly, and you're going to have to pay the monopoly price. And so how do they get away with this? They pay off the people that are willing and able to take the corporate special interest money. And Debbie is as transactional a representative as anybody that I have ever seen. So who decided to talk about this issue? Jimmy Dore and Joe Rogan. Here we go.
Let's start with step one. Let's start with the housing, right? How does that work? Like if you want to create affordable housing for people, but you have this competitive real estate market, like we were talking earlier about how expensive houses are.
It's nuts how expensive it is in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Shitty houses cost $1 million.
Yeah.
In my old neighborhood in Pasadena, a regular house, 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, they're now going for $1 million.
Yeah.
And it's not a nice neighborhood. It's just a regular neighborhood.
Right.
And I'm like, how do these, because
it's loans and you're basically 30 years, you're paying it off and you know, and we saw what happened in 2008 with all that shit, with the subprime mortgage.
And the old,
and here's the problem. And Jimmy is absolutely correct because the same problem is happening here in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami market where we are located. There is no limit to how many units these corporations are able to get their hands on. It drives the prices up and up and up, and people cannot afford to live. This is such a crisis. It absolutely is incredible. But the good news is we're not alone in recognizing this crisis. The importance of Jimmy and Joe talking about this is that millions of people are going to hear it and see it. And that's important. And there's a lot of people down here that are going to see it and hear it. I'm going to tell you guys a small story in a minute. We're going to continue.
And now they're doing that thing where the hedge funds or the equity companies, which got bailed out during the COVID upward transfer of wealth, are now buying up all the houses and renting them out so they keep people paupers.
And Jimmy is 1,000% right about this. And these are the people that are donating to Wasserman Schultz to look the other way and not do a thing about it. We have a corporate housing crisis here in Broward County. It's a real thing. You know how I know? Because I lived in one of those houses. It's basically the equivalent of being a tenant and you're responsible for everything in the house. So you're a tenant who has to act as the owner as well. Something breaks, it's your fault. Pipes out, lights out, doesn't matter. You're going to be responsible for it because the corporate entity that owns the house, they don't care. And these are all subsidiaries of the very companies that we've talked about, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. Private equity has destroyed housing in the United States. And the people who are corrupt, like our Congresswoman, are open for business and taking that money so that nothing changes and the rich get richer and the poor continue to suffer. And it's not just people that can't afford to buy a home. That's the other thing that people need to remember. While most can't, and it has become a situation where people cannot afford to buy a home, It's also people that own homes that are suffering as a result, trying to keep up with the pace. Very, very hard to do. Even people that are in the middle and even upper middle class are having this problem. Now, I don't know if that's going on everywhere in the United States, but I can tell you it's going on here. I'm not saying that Jen could wave a magic wand on Capitol Hill and that'll solve the problem, but you know what? What if Jen was the federal representative here? And what if she rallied people in the county to say, we're going to pass an ordinance through the mayor's office and on the county commission and ensure that corporate housing is now banned in Broward County? That would help. It would help a lot. And it's just the start. But that's something that can be done. Using the power of the federal seat to garner momentum amongst the people who live in these communities and say, we are going to fight City Hall and we are going to help ourselves with our housing. Debbie sure as hell ain't going to do that. And the proof is in the pudding. She takes their filthy money to just let it get worse and worse and worse. We'll continue.
Because the only way to really create wealth in America anymore is now through real estate. And so if you can't get real estate, you're going to be a pauper forever. So you've heard about those stories, right? Where there's the big equity firm that bought, in fact, one whole city, I think in Texas somewhere. And then you have to go rent from them forever.
I have heard that nationwide, that there's this trend of like giant corporations buying houses. And that you have to, like, if you see a house for sale, you got to jump on it quick because there's
they'll come in and they'll overbid.
What is that? What's happening there?
So as far as I can tell, what's happening there is they're cornering the market and they're creating monopolies and they're artificially raising the prices so then they can have you as a renter forever. And
so they're buying these houses and then they won't sell them. They're just using them as rental properties and that they'll control the ownership of these houses.
Yeah.
1,000%, Joe. That is what's happening. I do commercial real estate for a living. And I can assure you that this is real and it's a crisis. I will not work with these people, but others will. And the monopoly continues. It's a big problem. And you know who owns a lot of commercial real estate? The Israelis. They own a lot of it. Now, I don't know if that's just a Florida thing and a New York thing and a California thing, but they own a lot. That's how that wealth gets so exponentially big and strong that you can commit a genocide and people in the media and society at large pretend like it's not happening or, yeah, it sucks, but, well, if the other guy gets in, it's going to get worse. So there is this defense shield that gets thrown up. All because people don't want to mess with the system. The apple cart, the financial gravy train, as Steve pointed out earlier. We'll keep going.
But this is a new thing?
This seems like it's a new thing.
Like
the article I read.
Yeah, I read it too, but I just glanced at it.
And
I got depressed and I put the fucking phone down. I was like, Jesus Christ.
I had this, you know, the shit they do with, for rich people, money's free. Right, because you go get zero interest law. All that's like all the money that they gave out to the banks and stuff. It's just they were going to give them $1 trillion a day. The Fed they'll give them $1 trillion a day. So this idea that we can't solve our problems, you know, you travel to other countries, they've solved their problems. Right,
yeah.
I was in Norway, no homeless people.
But it seems like they've been on top of it from the jump. They never let it get to a point where you've got 100,000 people in Los Angeles that are homeless. That's where it becomes a problem when it gets so bad. Like I was talking.
The other thing that Joe just brought up, which is a huge problem down here and is something that Governor DeSantis has made exponentially worse, is that we're criminalizing homelessness. Now, of course, the Supreme Court just decided to criminalize it officially across the board, but this has been a problem in South Florida for quite some time, particularly in Fort Lauderdale. We're just going to kick people, I don't know, to another street corner. Again, it's like more prisons and more cops don't solve economic plight and crime. Having a living wage and universal health care does. But the powers that be don't want that because that takes money out of their ill-gotten gain pockets. This is all very simple when you get down to it. Doesn't mean that they're going to be giving it up. But the actual reasoning behind it is pretty clear.
To the mayor of Austin, and we were describing the homeless situation here, and he's like, you got to get a hold of it now. He goes, because if it gets worse, it's going to get to a point where if you look at Los Angeles, it's essentially unfixable. And he was describing, like, we don't have the resources to fix something like that. But Austin's homeless situation is somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people. He's like, that's fixable is if we act now. If you act now and start providing shelter. And so they're doing these things, they're trying, and a lot of people don't think they're trying fast enough, and they've instituted this tent ban, and some people are against it, and some people are celebrating it, and it's a very divisive thing in the city. Yeah. Because this is a weird city, right? It's a progressive city that's in this red state, and there's a lot of conflicts about how to handle these situations. But the mayor Steve Adler had a great point. He's like, you could get a hold of it now, and you could stop. And he goes, and that is my one goal in the year and a half that I have left in office, is to get a hold of this and start making some progress and to lay the foundation for if he leaves office and the next mayor comes in, they have a plan. There's something they can follow.
That was actually a very important segment that they discussed. I did listen to the interview. There are things I agreed with. There are things I did not agree with. But this particular issue regarding housing, I thought was crucial for Jimmy and Joe to cover. I think they covered it fairly well for the most part. It's pretty obvious what the key issue is here, and they nailed it, specifically Jimmy, regarding the private equity capture of our real estate market, especially single-family homes. It's only getting worse. I find it absolutely disgusting that RFK is the only presidential candidate who's really talking about this and making it a big part of his focus as a candidate, because it is a crisis of exceptional level. I cannot emphasize enough that even in this broken system of ours, and maybe it's just the acceleration towards the breaking of the dam, whatever that's going to look like, but we're heading to a point where we're just going to be a nation of serfs. And we don't want that. We don't need that. And we've got to change that.